Carter, everybody recognizes her. By the way, she was Miss World, not just Miss USA. I mean, she's big, yeah. And it continues to shrink. And by the time you get to the 90s, one thing that's very interesting is that it starts, at the bottom actually starts going up over her hip. Thinking, really? Let me go into battle on that. Again, you actually see the change from the eagle to the W. That was George Perez in honor of the waves and the wax that she represented in World War II. But the top drops, the bottom goes up, and again, we start seeing this progression. Again, here she is in her biker form. Look at how tough she's now looking. Look at the muscles, right? Lean and very tough. She actually chopped off her hair for a short time.
Always hippie.
Yes, very good. The very narrow waist, big hips, big bosom. Her frame actually doesn't support this too well sometimes. And then notice, what do we see here in all of these images?
She is wonderful because she can keep it all in that little teeny top.
That is the exact idea. Starting in the 40s, that was the idea. She had enough to keep that top up without glue, right? Without tape. But you can see this is actually the modern costume, and again, they've actually seemed to have combined several different versions of her character. Yeah, it's kind of.
She had some. What the things called silly and things the boobs making different.
Oh,
So yeah, they had
she
some
has implants. Maybe she does. This is that hypersexualization that really starts showing up further and further. Now we do take a segue in 2009. This is an animated Wonder Woman in the actual movie Wonder Woman, the animated version. And they actually thought about her character. They actually thought about giving her a slender or athletic appearance without making her too much of anything, which is interesting. And then at the very end, that is our failed Wonder Woman. And it's funny because everybody looks at that and they go, that costume is terrible. And even when they tried to fix it, it was still terrible. It was just an awful, awful outfit. So we saw the hair, the musculature, the evolution of the breastplate, the evolution of the skirt, and then the modern debate. Because the irony is that today we're more advanced, but she's an icon. So we don't want to change the costume, even though we need to change the costume, right? All right, Invisible Woman, happily much shorter. Wonder Woman is 70 years old, by the way. That's why there's so much on her. Invisible Woman is only 50. Isn't that great? So not so much. Invisible Woman is actually the first of the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four, excuse me, is Marvel's first attempt at a teen book, and she is Marvel's first superheroine. There is no magic. She's mutated. I don't know if that makes a difference, but it does. She's postmodern, and so the characters have a lot of irony in them. We actually see that she's drawn in a very adventure-based style. They actually merge. Marvel merges pop art into its style, so she's more action-oriented than Wonder Woman was initially. She starts off, Sue Storm starts off as the Invisible Girl. She was not a popular character. This, by the way, is the first edition. Notice that what she's saying is, I can't turn invisible fast enough. How can we stop this creature? Torch, yes. Look at her male teammates. Fire, super strength, super elasticity. What does she do?
Disappears.
She turns invisible. How feminine is that? Very Victorian, isn't it? Female behind the scenes. She's not designated to be a leader. Stan Lee said feminism didn't even affect him. Didn't think about it. Her contemporary is the Wasp. The Wasp and the Invisible Woman, both were meant to be wives. Wives and mothers. So essentially, she also serves as the damsel in distress. Now she is unique because of the heroes, she is married and she's successfully married. It is successful. She's not divorced. All these others get divorced. She does not have very many male role models. This gets to be a little weird. She actually met her husband when he was 23 and she was 12. And you think, really? That's a little odd. But she kept tabs on him, apparently. She stalked him until she got into college, and then they started dating. So she was legal, and they started dating. So she doesn't seem to have a lot of male experience. Her father was in jail. She had a younger brother. And so Reed Richards is kind of this odd father figure for her, and that Freud could have a lot of fun with that. And notice too, I even love the marriage, the wedding picture, because he's in his uniform and she's not. So how come they're not on equal footing there? So essentially, she ends up kind of as a very maternal character. Her future husband is tied to her, or her future is tied to her future husband and fiance. Everything she does is for him in the end. He is actually trying to fight and build a rocket ship to beat the commies into space. It's a space race. And his funding is pulled, and he has nobody to work with. And so Sue says, "Oh, my darling, I will go." And when she goes, her younger brother says, "Well, if you're going, I'm going." So for those of you who have younger siblings, never say that you're going on an experimental space rocket ride, because they will tag along. And it's interesting because the pilot, who is Ben Grimm, doesn't want to do this anymore. And she actually turns to him and said, "Of all the men, Ben, I didn't think you'd be yellow." She goads him into going. And if it wasn't for her, this wouldn't have happened. So essentially, I think that's quite a very interesting statement. She calls him out on his own manliness. Later on, she's affected by cosmic radiation, which apparently brings out the individual's personality. Well, even though she wants to be a superstar, a model, a movie star, she's shy, and so she turns invisible. And you go with that. Now, a later edition actually said that Stan Lee actually represented the 4 elements. I like that one better, but I think that's a postmodern reinterpretation of the character. Earth, wind, water, and fire, and that she represented wind. Okay. But initially, they never said that. It was her inherent nature. She's not a popular character. People complained about her. One person wrote in and said, out of 8 issues, she was captured 4 times. That's not a good record. She actually, they recount their adventures in issue 11. They retell the story. Sue's part is downplayed. At the very end, she actually says, "These adventures belong to you boys, not to me." And the way they placate her is by throwing her a surprise birthday party. And she's so thrilled because they remembered her birthday. And they say, "Sue, you're not leaving, you're one of us." So she is accepted by them. And it's interesting because issue 11 of Fantastic Four was actually a rebuttal from the editors to the fans who were complaining. But I love this panel. This is even in my thesis. Look at how she's treated. It looks as though I'm just going to be along for the ride. I'm not sure how I can help. This is a general who replies, "Miss Storm, a pretty young lady, can always be of help just by keeping the men's morale up." And then look at how her teammate, this is her future husband, and he says, "That's just how we feel about her." And you go, really? Ouch. She has to battle her shyness. She does this constantly. She's constantly afraid of being flustered. She faints. She becomes invisible at bad times. And she knows this. And in fact, she is actually one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe, but she doesn't discover her own power. Her husband does. He looks at her and he says, "Wait, you've got more potential than we thought." And it's he who opens that potential with experimentation, and then he's the one who shows her how to use her powers. Because we all know in 1964 that you can't let a woman out with power without some good patriarchal backing, right? Because this does happen in the 60s. So here we go. Now here's something interesting that happens. Feminism kicks in. When she uses her force shields initially, she has to be visible, which means that she doesn't hide anymore. She actually uses her visibility to her advantage. There she is pregnant, and when y'all look at that, nobody goes, at least I did. I was like, "Oh, isn't that a cute picture?" Whereas Wonder Woman, you go, "Oh, that's weird." But she is unique because she's also a mother. However, even her own pregnancy doesn't go well, and her husband has to save her from the most womanly thing she can do, because the cosmic radiation mutates her too far. And so Reed Richards has to save her again. He's the one who finds the cure. She is actually quite good because she is a successful mother, not once, but ultimately twice. And other female characters who've had children, it doesn't do so well. Donna Troy, Wonder Girl, Wonder Woman's counterpart, has a baby and gets married, goes through a nasty divorce, and the husband and the kid die in a car accident. So here, Invisible Girl does pretty well. The only negative is that she's never consulted on her own son, and at one point, the boy is so powerful that Reed Richards puts him into a coma without consulting the mother. Admittedly, that's fairly upsetting to her. She leaves him, and she goes to the arms of Reed Richards' rival, her other boyfriend. Anybody recognize him?
Oh, yeah.
Namor, the submariner. Nobody ever, whatever happened to him? And it's, and again, very interesting image. But he ends up talking her into going back to her husband. Very interesting.
She,
Well, and she seems to have this alpha male thing. So she keeps going to these alpha males. She has a second child that dies as a stillborn, dies in birth. She goes insane. She is actually seduced at this point by two psychic men who pull out all of her dark tendencies, and she becomes Malice. And what I love about Malice is notice the energy, fighting, strength, all very high. Intellect is a 2. Ouch! She, again, is considered insane because she's angry. Well, also, by the way, she looks pretty good for just having had any form of pregnancy. I always find that's the exaggeration. Yes, gentlemen, everything snaps back into place. No. Again, the only way that she can be saved is to be rescued. Her husband figures it out. Eventually, she does become stronger. These are all the Marvel women, fairly strong group. At one point, she takes over the team. Her husband disappears, she takes over. She does very well. And do you recognize the women out of curiosity? Let's see how many comic book nerds are in here. You've got Captain Marvel, who, by the way, is actually a drunkard, loses her powers, ends up getting raped. Okay. Red Sonja, who wears a bikini bathing suit to go and do armed battle. Invisible Girl we're talking about. Medusa is the one with the hair. She actually has to leave her husband because she got pregnant without the permission of her people, and it's very complicated. She has to have the baby in secret. She has to run away. She raises the kid in secrecy. That's the Black Widow, who is, quite frankly, a widow. And in the very back, the goddess you see is Hel, H-E-L, from the Nordic mythology. So that's who she's lumped in with now. And Hel, by the way, is half rotting, half beautiful. Kind of an interesting mix herself. So essentially, in the most recent plots, she and her husband have fights over political views. She actually leaves him for a time to fight for her own views, leaving a note behind saying, "Fix this." She's still relying on him to fix it. But at the end, she ends up returning to him, and they're working on their marriage again. She has become stronger. But let's take a look at the images for her very quickly. I always love this one. Notice the Fantastic Four, what? Who saw that coming? So 50s to 60s, what is she doing here? She's ready to debut her new uniform, which is what? It's a mini skirt. And she actually says, "I can't wait to surprise Reed with this new mini skirt costume I've been designing." I'm like, really? Good for you. And notice, he's completely oblivious, by the way. He doesn't even notice. What's she doing here anyway? Here we start seeing the 70s to 80s, damsel in distress. Okay. Ah, there's Malice. I always love it. Whenever good girls go bad, why do they always become dominatrix, right? Spikes, right? I don't even understand the diamond. I'm very confused on that, but that's just me. But notice, she's the mistress of hate, right? That's her character. She recovers from this. This is her next costume. It was actually voted, along with Biker Wonder Woman, as one of the 16 worst costume redesigns of the 1990s. And it's terrible. How many of you look at that and go, yeah, let me wear that? We start moving into the 80s. She is starting to become more powerful now. Again, after she recovers from Malice, she actually does declare herself in 1987 to be Invisible Woman. Not Invisible Girl. She's now a woman. And you can see that from her outfit, apparently. And then here, one adjective I actually found to describe her was MILF. Okay, and I'm not kidding you. They actually had popularity contests for the Marvel women. They described them all, and she was the MILF. Now, anybody not know what a MILF is? It's mother I would like to freely associate with. Try to leave that out. So here she is, and look at her costume here. Total fashion model. I love that. And then, of course, again, notice of all the costumes, hers is the only one that seems to have a pretty strong V-neck. And of course, her movie persona, also the only one. Jessica Alba constantly unzipping the top of that outfit. So here's what we learn. She allows herself to fall into the process of appreciating herself. Invisible Girl is always seen doing her hair, going shopping, going to fashion shows. I love this, where she says, oh, I've only worn this twice and it's out of style. I wish Reed would take me out more. You're like, really? Yeah. She's preoccupied with her own attractiveness. At one point, she refuses to be seen because she has curlers in her hair. She's called into battle. She goes invisible because she can't be seen running through the streets with curlers. Okay? And she is constantly gazing in the mirror. She's worried about her form. The body image is part of her character. The Invisible Girl is the target of fantasies for male readers. She designs the costume, but the costume is spandex, and it clings to her most, right? And it's interesting because in 1963, I love this fan letter, a male fan requested the inclusion of more girls in the story. It's not for interest of diversity, but because girls were fun to look at. You can see how powerful her character is. Here's our last one. This one is one of the hardest to research. There's not a lot on her. Mary Marvel. How many of you are familiar with her? Produced by Fawcett Comics in the 1940s. She actually shows up quite a bit later, 42. She's the third of a series of heroes that deal with Captain Marvel. She was published in 4 concurrent books, making her the second most popular female character after Wonder Woman. But notice, is she a woman? She's a girl. She's a teenage girl. She's 12 years old. And she is never seen as being any more important or even equal to her fraternal twin brother. The brother gets the credit and the name. So she is a reflection of her brother, Captain Marvel. This is actually what DC got sued Fawcett over because he was too much like Superman. Captain Marvel actually has to earn his title. He passes the 7 deadly sins. He is considered pure of heart, and he earns the magical title of Shazam. When he says Shazam, he actually draws on Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury for wisdom, strength, stamina, power, courage, and speed. How masculine can you get, right? She is actually going to be the 3rd character. Captain Marvel gives some of his power to a crippled young boy that becomes known as Captain Marvel Jr. Notice that when Captain Marvel Jr. becomes his superhero form, he's a boy. Mary Marvel is 3rd. Mary's an amnesiac. Her parents are killed. Billy is sent to an orphanage. She's adopted by a family. She has a sheltered life. Traditional. She does not earn the title. Billy Batson recognizes his sister, Mary. He's the one that tries to get her to remember herself. She does not remember anything until her family, her adopted family, is put into jeopardy. And then she's passively accepted, not for proving herself, but she's passively accepted and given the word Shazam so that she can become Mary Marvel. So Captain Marvel has to prove himself and his virtue by actually passing the 7 deadly sins. All she sees is her family in trouble, and she goes into the spiritual dimension, and you just go with it. And she sees her mother's spirit, all of the feminine qualities, and she ends up passively getting, oh, okay, you're his sister, here you go, here's Shazam for you. And unlike her brother, here's who she calls on: Selena, Hippolyta, Ariadne, Zephyrus, Aurora, Minerva. Grace, strength, skill, speed, beauty, and wisdom. Zephyrus is a male god. They couldn't find any female Z names, but Zephyrus is also the most effeminate of a group of gods from the Greeks. He's the west wind. He's a kind of a gentle character. So she is the feminine counterpart. Later on, they redefine her character, and she's actually modified in 1987. She also earns the word Shazam, and she and her brother call upon the same gods. And also notice she gets a little bit bigger and a little bit more powerful. But Mary is always put on the same level as Captain Marvel Jr. She's not a leader. She and Junior, notice, they're the same age. Captain Marvel, in his human form, is a 12-year-old boy, but he's designated the leader because when he transforms, what's he become? A man, compared to a boy and a girl, right? So she's actually a supporting character in the beginning. She's a sweet young woman, I love this, who packs quite a punch, courageously defending her hometown of Fawcett City from mutant worms, Nazi terrorists, and ancient deities gone mad. I did that when I was 12, how about you? But she's 12. There's no romance. She's not going to date anybody. There's not going to be anybody pursuing her. She's 12 years old, right? She does mature. Let's hope there's nobody pursuing her. This is 1940, so it's innocent, okay? Naughty, naughty back there. But notice, this is, by the way, Captain Marvel Jr. Has he grown up just a little bit?
Yes.
So does she. She also grows up. They fall in love, they start dating, but then something terrible happens. She loses her powers. They all lose their powers. The wizard who granted the word Shazam dies, and they're all powerless. She nearly dies. She wakes up in the hospital in a coma, and there's nobody there with her. She doesn't know it, but the two male characters have to reclaim the powers of Shazam. But she is despondent and desperate, and without her powers, she doesn't identify herself as Mary Batson. She only identifies with the superpowered figure, Mary Marvel. And without her males there, she feels lost. There's no family. So what she does is she ends up getting a new male benefactor. Who recognizes this one? This Black Adam, the negative version of Shazam. Captain Marvel's the good guy. This is the penultimate bad guy. You can tell because he's got a skeleton behind him, right? He actually seduces her just like the Invisible Woman and brings her into his power. And notice what happens when she calls on her power. Is she a little girl anymore? Not a little girl. Yeah. Not only is she not a little girl, but what color is her outfit?
Black.
Yeah. So
Black
who-
Adam done took her to the top.
Yeah.
Seems like.
And it's interesting because like the Invisible Woman before her, she has to undergo grief, anger, rejection, loss of identity to find her powers. Now I'm happy to say this is the only 3 slides we've got for her because these are her 3 major costumes. What do you think of this one?
Girly.
Yeah, it's a little girl play dress, isn't it? 12-year-old girl. Here, this is the 1980s when she's reintroduced. Everybody hated her because she was a Girl Scout, she was a goody-goody. But wait, what color dress does she have on?
White.
Which would indicate,
Roman.
yeah, purity, virginal aspect. And I love this because this reminds me of the 80s t-shirts where you just put on a belt, right? So she's kind of trendy there. But here we are, 2010.
She's on.
Yeah, what happened to her hair?
She on. Yeah.
The skirt has shrunk, the cape is gone, and she's become a little eroticized, hasn't she? I love his character. I think he says something like, looks like Mary's grown up, or something like that. I mean, he actually states it somewhere in there. So, essentially, she goes from a girl to a teenager to an adult, and it's interesting because as an adult, that sensuality and sexuality, dark costume, short costume, muscular. Ah, the conclusion. I know you thought we'd never get there. In comparison to their other counterparts, their male counterparts, women have to struggle harder to find their identity, right? They seem to lose it a lot. Wonder Woman comes from an all-female society. Her struggle is to achieve and maintain acceptance in the patriarch's world. The Invisible Woman always wanted to be a mother and wife, but she doesn't have any self-identity until later. And Mary Marvel is going from a girl to a woman and also struggling with her own self-identity. Am I a good girl or a bad girl? Right now she's a bad girl. Each espouses the feminine virtues in very different ways. You've got your virgin, your potential mother, and then your mother, quite literally. Maiden nymph, not quite crone. Maiden nymph and mother. The 3 must develop over decades. This does not happen overnight. As you can see, this is a lot of research, right? Wonder Woman's struggle is the most epic, but hey, she's the oldest. She's had a lot of years to struggle. The invisible girl grows up into the invisible woman, and you just saw the transformation with Mary Marvel. They do grow up. The exploit of these characters creates a great insight into gender bias through feminine expectations. Comic books do reflect cultural inferences through the lens, particularly through a masculine lens. And over time, each superheroine does claim an amount of autonomy and independence, though it takes a great deal of personal trial. The men, man, they're ready to go. The women have to lose their identity and rediscover it, you know? And for my students here, you all complain about 3 resources? I don't want to hear it anymore. So are there any questions? Yes?
Were all of these books and stories and images written by men or women?
Men. Although Gail Simone actually does write Wonder Woman for a time and does feminize her. And DC Comics is currently using her as an editor for Birds of Prey, which is an all-female team. Interestingly enough, when you look at the Birds of Prey, they still have sexy costumes, but not as sexy. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
Why is Wonder Woman the only one that comes out grown?
Because I think she was just older when she started out, and she was actually designed for a feminist point of view, whereas Invisible Girl was not.
Because at the time, they had the war going on, the women were here working.
Yes.
Men in the factories and things.
I noticed in the 50s, when women have to go back into the homes, is when Wonder Woman becomes a romance columnist, and she steps back in her job considerably. You know, so it's actually a reflection of what's going on in society. The men come home, so ladies go home. Good. You all survived?
Where did you find all this information, Dr. Stark?
A bazillion and a half books.
All the sites, I saw you cite
Yeah.
about
A lot of
15
sites.
sites.
I've actually been working on this since about March, when I first started approaching. And I actually did use St. Pete College online resources.
Use the online library.
They got me some good sources, and then I ended up buying a lot of books, believe it or not. But I'm sure they'll be important, I'll use them again. So it's all
So
good.
some of these old comics would be pretty expensive.
Oh, actually, the comic books, yes. A lot of those I did not. You can find some of them archived. And I actually had to go sometimes and find panels. Although I do have some of the 70s, 80s, 90s, but yeah. Yes?
Did you follow these comic books when you were growing up?
I wasn't a huge Wonder Woman fan, oddly enough. Fantastic Four I did for a while, and Mary Marvel was always annoying to me. So no, I was always a fan of, however, the Justice League of America. I always liked teen books, which is ironic because, of course, one of the attributes of femininity is grouping, right? Grouping, teamwork. In fact, I just had that conversation that you need a society. And so I've always found the teen books to be a little bit more interesting. So, and I actually was a huge Marvel fan for many years, and then Marvel just went too glamorous and too complicated, and I don't know. So I ended up in DC quite hardcore. There you go. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming out and for making this presentation. Any students who came in a little bit late, make sure that you sign in. But otherwise, if there are any questions, come and see me. But
Thank you.
one last plug. If you all have the time, there is an art show in the library depicting Faces of the Feminine, the Superheroines, and you can vote for your favorite work. I collected the first series of ballots. Actually, there's several ties. So if you all get the opportunity, please do vote.
We have an artist here, right?
Yes, actually, we do have an artist here.
Who submitted one of the works.
And actually, Boo, your works have been voted on, I'm happy to say. Boo actually did a piece called I Want to Be a Superhero. And it's actually a really neat piece. It was appreciated also by the St. Pete Times Reporter. Hopefully there'll be another article coming out, we'll see. But it's gotten some very nice reception. In fact, one of the votes actually put a note on there that, thank you so much, Boo, you are a superhero. So.
Well, I have to say, I haven't finished it. I know I don't want to grow up and be a graphic artist. It's really, really hard to do a graphic novel, and I so appreciate the hard work, and I don't want to do it again.
How about a superheroine?
Well, I
You
can be a
are in that
superhero.
piece.
I can do that, but I'm going to draw a graphic novel. I mean, just that one panel, and I went, oh, no,
It's a lot of work, it
It
was.
was.
And she also painted her piece, so even more work.
And the artist made herself a superhero, didn't she?
Yes, self-identification
That
with the
was
superhero
interesting.
concept.
Yeah,
It actually matches why people read comics. Very good.
But I didn't puff myself up hypersexually.
Well, next time you know, right?
But I did remove a few lines here and there.
It's all right. I'm about ready to do the same next time I do some more. Excellent, good for you. Well, thank you again.
thanks.
Thank you. Everything go to sleep. I tried to move it along.
No,